Robert Eggers has recently emerged as one of the most interesting modern filmmakers, and with the release of his fourth film, Nosferatu, I think it's time to rank all his films from least good to best. No matter which one you pick, there's going to be a decent percentage of the fan base that's going to agree with you, and an even greater percentage is going to disagree with you. So that's why I'm weighing into this debate because, of course, all of my opinions are the objectively correct opinions. So if you disagree with me, you are wrong, but it's okay to be wrong. And with that disclaimer out of the way, let's get into the list, starting at number 4, which is Nosferatu. This is the newest of the four, and it is my least favorite, but that does not mean that it's bad. In fact, I think this one proves just how great Robert Eggers is as a filmmaker, because he's 4 films into his career so far, and he has not put out a single one that I've given less than a 7 out of 10. There are plenty of major directors that can't even get one movie to that level, let alone 4 in a row. This movie is, of course, a remake of the silent classic Nosferatu, which was an unofficial adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula. This movie has a lot of elements that are mainstays of Robert Eggers' work. For starters, it does a great job of portraying the time period with a great degree of accuracy. I think all 4 of his movies, with the possible exception of The Northman, deserve to win awards for the costumes and set design and language choices because of just how incredible of a job they do into immersing you into times past. There are also some great looking images, solid atmosphere, and good performances featuring a lot of people that show up repeatedly in Eggers' productions. Despite all that though, I am putting this one at the bottom, and I think that deserves an explanation. I think the reason this one is my least favorite comes down to this. I went into this movie hoping to see a Nosferatu remake that would be like The Witch, and instead I got a Nosferatu remake that was like The Northman. The Nosferatu concept started in silence. It was a silent film, and that's why I think a quieter, more atmospheric presentation like that of The Witch would have served it better. The Northman, on the other hand, is a much louder, more bombastic, more commercial release, as we'll get into in a second, and that's the one that Nosferatu takes after more. For that reason, many of the scares feel kind of standard, and it just doesn't have the kind of punch that it could have had. I just feel like I've seen this story done better before, like in the 1979 Nosferatu, which I vastly prefer. Nevertheless, this is still a solid Dracula movie, and it even made it into my top 15 horror films of the decade video, which I just recently released. So Robert Eggers is still sitting pretty with this one, even though it is my least favorite of the 4. At number 3 is The Northman. This is a really solid Viking movie with Alexander Skarsgård and Anya Taylor-Joy. It follows this young Viking prince who witnesses the death of his father at a young age and vows revenge. But as he grows up, he kind of forgets that purpose until one day his fate comes calling once again. The Northman follows a very emotionally distant warrior, which is not that uncommon for a movie to do, but it gives his story a lot more thematic complexity than is common for these types of movies. I love the way it plays with the idea of fate, that maybe our destinies are determined, and how our free will plays into those. I also like the way that it explores what it means to be a man from the perspective of this long-gone society. Instead of forcing his own commentary into it, Robert Eggers just basically allows the past to speak and allows us to learn from it. But once again, this one is not at the top like it will be for some, and I'll explain why that is. There are a few reasons why this one's a bit lower on the list, but one of the big ones, like I mentioned with Nosferatu, is that this one just plays a bit too commercial for me at times. It still has plenty of the great artistry that I love from Robert Eggers, but I can feel it holding back at times and compromising in order to make concessions to a more mainstream audience. And because of that, it feels like it lacks the purity of vision that his first couple movies had. That being said though, my complaints with this one are definitely on the minor side, and I still think it's awesome and I'm glad it exists. At number 2 is The Lighthouse. This is a very bizarre movie that combines elements of Greek mythology, seafaring lore, and Lovecraftian horror with this story of 2 men who become isolated on an island while tending to a lighthouse. This is the kind of movie where basically every frame of it is a work of art. The black and white cinematography is simply stunning, and it builds this oppressive atmosphere that continues to increase as these two men become more and more driven towards madness by their isolation. The Lighthouse basically has a cast of two, both of whom are heavy hitters. Robert Pattinson is really good as this younger, less experienced lighthouse keeper, and Willem Dafoe is out of this world as the older one. The interactions between these two are the heart of the movie. I love their relationship where one second they're just joking around and then the next second they've got knives at each other's throats. I also love the symbolism throughout the movie. There's no concrete answer as to what exactly it all means, but there are a lot of interesting theories that can be had that will lead to some very interesting conversations. This is one where I think the fact that it's very open to interpretation actually benefits it. The only thing that slightly held it back from being at the top of the list is that there are a few sections of the movie that are a bit slow for me, but I love this movie and it almost made it to number one. But of course, at number one is The Witch. This one is my favorite of the four. It did end up being a lot more popular than you'd expect a little indie horror drama like this to be, but even still, a lot of people are more familiar with Ari Aster's Hereditary, which is a very similar movie that takes a lot from this one. So if you got something out of that movie, I highly recommend The Witch as well. The plot basically follows this isolated family of New England settlers who begin to be torn apart by paranoia under the influence of a witch in the forest. This is a very dark and deeply unsettling film. It's not exactly one that you're going to want to put on for family movie night unless you're the Manson family or something, but it is a very good film. The atmosphere is so smothering, I just can't help but get drawn in. Like with The Lighthouse, the cinematography is incredible. It has this bewitching natural beauty to it that just sucks me deeper into the nightmare. The period accuracy is definitely one of the big draws. The way this crew recreated New England from the 1630s is nothing short of extraordinary. Aside from a few very minor inaccuracies that historical experts have pointed out, the costumes, sets, and language choices are nearly flawless. Some people complain about the archaic language, but I couldn't disagree more with those complaints. I love how poetic the Old English is. I think it's just one of those dumb things that Americans complain about, like subtitles and stuff. The real star of the show, though, is the characters and the actors who are playing them. Anya Taylor-Joy will forever be that girl from The Witch to me to some degree. This is a breakout role for her because her performance was just so good. Ralph Ineson and Kate Dickie are also really good as the parents. Their characters are very complex and they really are the heart of this movie. And then there's the kids who all give insanely impressive performances for their age. Yeah, The Witch is quite an experience and it's my favorite of Robert Eggers' films. But I want to know what your list looks like. Do you hate The Lighthouse and wonder how anyone could possibly like it? Do you love The Northman and think it's a masterpiece? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And with that said, I will see you in the next review.